This week, Leo Varadkar, after a months-long Christmas holiday, is swanning off to Davos to get instructions from the World Economic Forum, rather than answering questions on a multitude of crises we have domestically here in Ireland, such as the migration disaster, the homeless disaster, the housing disaster, and the chaos in our hospital system, with 1 million people on hospital waiting lists. But Leo is more interested in heading off to Davos to get instructions from his masters in the World Economic Forum. And as well, he's using a jet that's going to cost us over €30,000 to head off to Davos, rather than use the government jet, which they said cannot make it that far. So they're really absolutely taking the complete and utter mick out of Irish people, ordinary people, who are struggling because of all these disasters, because of the cost of living disaster and the impacts of all the crises that I just mentioned. But Leo's more interested in siding up to the 1%, who he really represents and who he serves, and these so-called elites in Davos, people like Antony Blinken, Ursula von der Leyen, the unelected head of the European Union, and we have many more world leaders and CEOs of big financial institutions and tech companies that Leo will get his instructions from. So this is who Leo Varadkar, a young global leader himself at the World Economic Forum, represents. He's more interested in serving the rich and powerful in society. Today a report came out that the top 1% in Irish society have 1/3 of the wealth. When you consider the disaster we have in terms of people being afraid to turn on their heating, so many people who are forced into homelessness, so many people living in poverty in Irish society, and people are afraid are making decisions between heating and eating. And then you consider the huge inequalities in Irish society where the top 1% have 1/3 of the wealth. And this is who Varadkar represents. Varadkar is not interested in Irish democracy, Irish sovereignty, Irish independence. He's more interested in selling us out to these unelected bureaucrats in Brussels and the European Union and the World Economic Forum. And it's interesting this week in the World Economic Forum because the whole premise of this meeting is rebuilding trust. Wouldn't that make you laugh? Rebuilding trust, says the World Economic Forum. And how are they going to rebuild trust? They're going to work it through attacking misinformation, so-called disinformation, and trying to have their own ministry of truth and their own propaganda being pushed as the only truth, rather than having all the facts being presented in a democracy where you would have all the facts presented to everybody so people can make decisions based on all the facts affecting their lives and affecting the good of society. But no, Leo Varadkar is more interested in taking instructions from them. And if you consider what's happening in our society with the hate speech bill, with the facial recognition technology, with the Digital Services Act, and all of these things happening, you can't take them in isolation. And then we see issues happening in our society around migration. Today, in Roscrea, the so-called Gardaí Public Order Unit went in and dismantled peaceful protesters who have real concerns about lack of services, infrastructure and facilities. Because as I mentioned earlier, the top 1% has 1/3 of the wealth, and ordinary people are suffering, and their conditions will get worse because of the crises created, because of all these big profiteers making money out of the migration industry, because of big bosses importing cheap labour, and as well as that, the impacts of who's going to pay for this in terms of more saddle onto our national debt and more cuts to public services, which is what the agenda of neoliberalism is. And we can see a drive towards corporate fascism, where the corporate state has a complete capture on the country. And that's what's happening in our society. We've seen it happen over the last number of years, and in particular now where it's happening at a lot faster pace. So all these issues cannot be taken in isolation. They should be taken collectively together. And we can see a huge attack on our democracy, a huge attack on our independence, and as I said, our sovereignty. And it's vitally important that anybody interested in the people of Ireland should be standing up for this and future generations, for Irish sovereignty, Irish independence and Irish democracy. It's vital. And stand up against these unelected institutions that try and call the shots to take over and serve their huge profits while enslave the rest of us. So thanks for tuning in to my videos. Please support my work through Facebook, YouTube, TikTok and X also as well. So from Dublin today, take care.